let's get back to the show though. The television title, you are officially the person who's held it longer than anyone else in history. 877 days when you combine all 4 reigns. Ironically, second place is Tully Blanchard with 3 reigns, 685 days. I guess that's the reason that you've always felt like this was sort of your world title. It is the belt you're most closely associated with, right?
Absolutely. And let me tell you, just hearing those numbers and not knowing that was that way, I've never been prouder. I looked at that as my world championship. There was never a thought that went through my head was, why am I not the world champion? It's pretty obvious. I'm not a guy they can market. You know, I'm not a body guy. I don't have the charisma of a lot of guys. I am the blue collar guy, and that's the blue collar championship, the world television title. And I took a lot of pride every single day, waking up, packing my bag, and laying that television title on the very top of that bag and carrying it with me through airports, to different towns, to everything imaginable, and walking through that curtain with that around my waist. I was never prouder. And I hope it's a legacy that people will, through time, will look at as being a positive. And maybe their goal will be to follow suit, which is whether the time limit is 10 minutes or 20 minutes or 30 minutes, make everyone that's in that audience think they're fixing to see something special, which is a title change. And that's the job of the television champion. And it's one that I thoroughly enjoyed.
It is a special title, and we even have a Arn TV title shirt available, arnshirts.com. Let's get in the weeds for a minute though. But before we do, I want to talk about what you said there when you said it's pretty obvious you weren't, or why you weren't the world champion. And I guess in a conventional sense, when you think about maybe the year 1990 and how, you know, one company's champion is Sting and the other company's champion is the Ultimate Warrior. So we've got, you know, crazy hairstyles and crazy face painting and neon colors and over the top personalities as far as their character. Maybe I could get behind what you're saying, but when you go back and you look at the start of your career, how was early Arn Anderson any different from Harley Race or Dory Funk or some of the other NWA world champions at the time? I mean, you would have fit in like peas and carrots with those guys as the NWA world champion.
Well, that's a tremendous honor to even throw my way, to be in the same sentence with the Funks, Harley Race, or any of those guys. And maybe if I would have been born 10 years earlier and could have been in that mix, I know I would have been honored. I would have been thrilled. God, could I have learned from those guys, because that kind of style, that grind it out and go 20 and 30 and 40 minutes and sometimes an hour and keep the audience on the edge of their seats. You know, that's my kind of stuff. Like I said before, I've never thrown a drop kick. I don't do anything off the top. I damn sure ain't jumping off the top to the floor, which is, you know, was starting to happen during my era. And we see where the businesses went now. It's like a bunch of world-class gymnasts out there. Some of the stuff these kids can do, male and female. But you know, what could have been, might have been. I just know in the 90s, you know, cosmetics, you had to have that cartoon character look bigger than life, like you just walked out of a television show that, you know, not a wrestling show, something, you know,
superhero movie, a comic book.
Yes, sci-fi.
Yeah.
You know, any of that. You know, just something that you look at them and they don't look like a human being walking around. They look like a sci-fi character. You know, that's what the deal was, and that's what it called for, and that wasn't me.
Well, you know, I'm just fascinated by that, because we've even talked about on Tony Schiavone's podcast, you know, if you were a little older, to your point, if you were 10 years older, would you have been in the Flair spot? Because you were very much in the same vein of a traditional NWA world champion. And then Flair comes around and has a totally different presentation, you know, from a guy like Harley Race to Ric Flair, the pomp and circumstance, the fancy robes, the the shtick on the microphone with the suits and the blah, blah, blah. It was a different deal compared to the Jack Briscoes and the Dory Funks and the Harley Races. I feel like you would have just fit right in there. And it's a little weird that you are so self-deprecating about your career. And I get that that's part of the reason that people love the show here is they feel like you're just open, honest, regular dude. But you've got to wonder sometimes like, hey, what if, because in a different, change of circumstance, just a little bit. I mean, I think people would be talking about you the way they talk about, Ric Flair or Jack Briscoe or Terry Funk, because here's the deal. People who really pay attention to wrestling do. They put you and Ricky Morton and Bobby Eaton and Ricky Steamboat in that same boat. I just wonder, if in a weird way, had you never bumped into Ric Flair, do you think life looks a little differently?
No, because I think Ric Flair was born to be Ric Flair. He was destined to do exactly what he did for the business the entire time he's been in the business. That was his destiny. Did I get a rub off of that relationship? Absolutely, 100%. But I go back and I'm thinking, and it's funny. I think I am, for whatever reason this is, I think I'm more popular now with the wrestling fans than when I wrestled. And I don't know if through the network and YouTube and all these things, they go back and they watch these matches, but they watch them with a different eye than they watched when maybe they were 8 years old or 15 years old or 17 years old or 21 years old. Now they're 40-year-old men or 45. And I know when I go to these, different signings and I have these guys come in with their dad, they're 40. They got their dad with them that's 65, and they got their son that's with them that's 6 years old. And they walk up and they're kind of all standing one in front of the other, and they're looking at me, and the 6-year-old throws up the four fingers.
Yeah.
You have no idea what a rush that is. How does a 6-year-old know? Well, the answer is he's been watching YouTube and he's been watching the network. And something that we did from that era, me included, grabbed him, or he would have just moved on. And then the dad starts telling me the story about being his age when his dad took him to the matches. And you've got the best thing that we could ever do or hope for in this business as a performer and an entertainer and a wrestler and all those things. For them to say, and I hear it a lot, almost exact quote, "You were a big part of my childhood. Thank you." That's all the reward I'll ever need, because that's real. And I believe them, and I look in their eyes, and a 35-year-old guy that brings his dad who's 55, and he says, "I just want you to know what you meant to my dad. He's a little bit shy and he won't tell you," but you hug the dad and he's crying. That to me was better than being the world champion. It was better than making millions and millions and tens of millions of dollars. It means that you did something permanent, something lasting, and something that mattered. You did what you set out to do, and that's go and entertain our audience to a level that not only do they remember you, they feel more in tune with you now than they even did back in the day. And that's the only way I can put it, because that's who I was. I don't think you're going to have, had I been back in the day and been wrestling Dory Jr. or Terry Funk or Dory Funk or Jack Briscoe, I don't think you're going to have women buying tickets to see that matchup. You're going to see a bunch of hard-ass guys and real men that want to see a hell of a fight, and that's what you would have got. That didn't necessarily sell out arenas. So I don't know if I could have ever carried the world title. It'll always be speculation. It's nice to be thought of, and including you, Conrad, put in the same sentence with those names. I just think I have my spot in history, and I'm fine with that.
Let me ask hypothetically, we've talked about this before. One of the reasons you wanted to get off the road with the WWF back in '89 is the crazy travel schedule. Had you been the NWA champion in the early '80s, That's back in the final days of the touring champ with all the different territories. Ultimately, it led Jack Briscoe to say, "Hey, enough of this. I'm done." Do you think that would have been a lifestyle for you, or would you have preferred not to?
I'd have probably went till I dropped, because there's no feeling. I've said it before, and it's money can't buy it. Movie cameras can't give it to you. People around you saying it to you. A lot of people can dump about a bunch of positive stuff on you about what a big star you are. Hey, I love wrestling, yada, yada, yada. There is no second place for going through that curtain, having a game plan, taking your maestro stick out and moving that audience every way that you want to move them, right on command, have a finish to the story, and come back through that curtain knowing you're exhausted and you have exhausted the audience in a good way. And that's the reward, and that's the thing that I wished I could still do. Even at my age, if I could have a match and not disappoint everybody on not only this planet, but every other planet that's out there, God, what I wouldn't give just to have one more good 30-minute match, because that's why I was in it.